Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruyi, and I'm a PhD student from Northeastern University. Today, it's my great honor to present our work probing not protecting pre-trained encoder from malicious probing here. But before we go to the content, I would like to thank our co-authors, Tong Zhou, Professor Lili, Professor Aidong, Professor Xiaolin, Professor Yunsi, all from Northeastern University, as well as I'm going to acknowledge the National Science Foundation for support our project. Okay. To begin with, let's think about how people usually train machine learning models. Well, you may say we just train these models from scratch. Well, the most often used method nowadays is that people can use those pre-trained checkpoints and use their own data to fine-tune them for a different objective. This is what we call transfer learning. And one of the common use method for transfer learning is that we can freeze those very complex layers, such as earlier, like attention layers, convolutional layers, as an encoder, and the user can just address the downstream linear part. We call it linear probing or model probing. So it's a downstream head, and a lot of companies provide such service, and user can query this API, encoder API, and get their own embeddings. So therefore, they can achieve a very good, accurate model on their own data set with a very low data requirement and a low training cost. However, today, we are going to talk about a potential IP threat for this scenario. It is saying that what if a malicious user try to redirect these pre-trained models on a different task, on some malicious tasks or allowed by these rules for this API provider. There is a line in the research field that focuses on this research. This is called applicability authorizations. The formal definition is that we try to prevent those pre-trained models from being misused by proactively restricting their transferability for harmful tasks. And today, we're going to focus on more flexible attacker when they focus on these pre-trained encoders, is that we try to make sure that when they try to use this encoder for some prohibited data, when they get this embedding, they cannot use these embeddings for downstream head that has a very bad accuracy. And when they use this for the normal user data, they can achieve a good accuracy. So let me put them into an example for classification model. For example, we have this we have defined these source domains, which is actually authorized by this model's provider, which can be some model like originally designed for example. And we have these so-called target domains, which is prohibited by these pre-trained encoders. And if this pre-trained encoder is not protected, any user can query this and get very high accuracy for both source and target domains. Well, what we try to do is that we propose a protection framework called encoder locker. We try to adjust part of these models with our framework, and the goal is saying that we try to make sure that the performance on the source domains is as good as originally it is, and the performance on the target domain is low, which is a very low accuracy, which means that transferability to these target domains is restricted. Okay, so with this in mind, we come to our first design objective. We call it inequalities and restrictions. So as I just mentioned, it's saying that we make the accuracy on the source domain high and accuracy on the target domain low. So this is our first objective. And as I just mentioned, because this framework is very flexible, the users can adjust their downstream head whatever they want. They can have different training data amount, they have different model architecture. So how can we ensure that this protection is robust is one of the very important questions. I list this as our second objective. And the last, but I think this is the most important thing, is that now we have a clear understanding what is the source domain is originally designed for this pre-trained model, but what is the target domains? These problems is not addressed by most of previous works. So we try to think about what is how this defender try to access these target domains, because we have no very clear definition of these target domains. So this is our, at least as a third objective, prohibited data accessibility. With these three objectives in mind, we try to build our framework. Okay, so first is the first objective, intelligence and restriction. So we propose a so-called domain-aware weight optimizations. There are more details in our paper you can find, but I can summarize them into two questions. The first is what to optimize. So if you look at the importance for machine learning models, you will find different ways has different importance to different data sets. And what we try to optimize is that we can try to adjust those ways critical to the target domain or prohibited domains and make sure that this ways is not hurt our performance for the inequalities, for the source domains. So we try to find these ways just like the right box, this blue. If we use this blue as a target domain, this blue peak. And the second question is how to optimize it. So we have a new loss called encoder locus loss, which is defined as two terms. The first is the original loss for source domains. We try to make sure it's very low so that the performance on the source domains keep good. And the second is these regularization terms. We try to make sure that with these regularization terms, the target loss is high. And here we use this log because we want to make sure that the regularization term is always effective because in the end, the loss on the source will be very low and the loss on the target will be high. Okay, with this loss function in mind, I will go back to it later, and I will put them on the right corner here. So the second objective is that how can we make sure that our protection is robust? So imagine you just have trained this encoder locker. We have this encoder. What we try to do is that we try to act as this attacker, which has addressed our downstream head according to this new your protection. So we actually train this downstream head. And for the next iteration, what we try to do is that we try to adjust our encoder again. We select a new set of ways and optimize them according to this new downstream head. And we will do this iteratively. In the end, the goal is saying that we try to make sure that this downstream head will try to increase this encoder locus loss, and the encoder part is trying to minimize it. Okay, this is a second part objective. We try to make this protection robust. And here comes to our last objective. What is the prohibited data accessibility? So this comes from the question I just asked. What is the prohibited data? The most straightforward scenario is that this data set can just be it's a data set, right? So we have a clear label and the data for all these data from the prohibited domains. And we try to protect the usage of this data set for our pre-trained model. So we have this so-called supervised encoder locker for this. We can just simply use some cross-entropy loss and plug that into this encoder locus loss. However, it's not often this case. What I mean is that imagine you try to build an encoder, you train your own model, and you try to make sure that this encoder cannot be used for certain data. What you try to do is that you can browse online, you search on Google, you find a set of images that is not allowed to appear in this model, to use these models. And that data set actually is not labeled. It's a random data set with only a sample. So the next scenario is that we call it unsupervised encoder. The goal is saying we only have this data, but this data is no labeled. So how to deal with this scenario is that we divided one batch of data into two types. Similar idea to the contrastive learning. It is that we have these positive pairs with sample I, means that the augmentation samples for the same sample, and negative pairs is from the different samples. So remember, we have no labels in this case, so we have this contrastive loss. We try to minimize the similarity between different negative pairs, and we try to maximize the similarity of these positive pairs. And use this new loss, we plug that into this encoder locus loss, and we try to solve these optimization problems. Okay, you can notice that there is still a space here. So that's because we have next level for this encoder locker. So what we try to do is saying that, okay, now I only have some rows to protect your pre-trained encoder. We have no label, we have no time to track the label online. So what if, in this case, how can you protect this pre-trained encoder? So for the third level of encoder locker, we propose a so-called zero-shot encoder locker. In this case, we have no data, we have no label. We have some description of these prohibited data, prohibited domains. In our research, in our paper, this description is such as military usage. We're saying that, okay, our model cannot be used for military usage. And what we do is that we try to leverage those generative model. We use an AI agent, and we use a text-to-image generator to generate a synthetic data set. And upon this, we also propose refined prompt algorithms. We try to refine our synthetic data set according to whether it's general to cover these prohibited domains, at least this description of these prohibited domains. Okay, I didn't put the algorithm here, but you can find the algorithms, all the algorithms on our paper. And put everything together, we propose domain-aware weight search algorithms that try to use the weight importance to select those important weights. And we have this self-challenge method to protect the robustness of our pre-trained encoder. And we have 3 different levels for it: the supervised, unsupervised for when we do not have any labels, and zero-shot when we have nothing, we use an AI agent. Okay, let me quickly go over the performance. We compare with different baseline methods, and we have evaluated that on different models. However, today I'm only going to show this accuracy drop here. We have this red curve as this performance on the source domains. Accuracy drop, this is the degradation of the performance when we apply this encoder locker. And we also have this blue curve. This is the accuracy drop on these target domains. You can easily find that for different level, supervised, unsupervised, and zero-shot, we have a very high accuracy drop on the target domains. Well, one thing we need to notice that is because the zero-shot encoder locker actually have a not very good performance. That is because you try to generate these synthetic data sets, you cannot guarantee that it doesn't hurt the performance on this target domain because this is AI generated. And more clearly, we can look at this latent space for these 2 different types of loss, supervised and unsupervised loss. So you can easily find that the source domains for both of these loss terms are well separated. And the target domain is just mixed up, classed together, mixed up. That means our downstream head cannot get much useful information from this target domain. And finally, this is an example in our paper. So we use this military data set as a prohibited data set. We have this tank image. And if this encoder is unprotected, we can see the tank gun is used as the most important feature, this red part. This red part highlights the critical features for classification is that this tank gun. And if we apply supervised encoder locker, these folks move to these wheels. That causes some misclassification, for example, with this comeback vehicle. And for unsupervised and zero-shot, this just become out of focus. That means we cannot get useful information from these pre-trained encoders. Okay, that's all my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your presentation. We can have one question.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, since there could be many different target domains,
yeah.
So can your encoder provide a universal protection of a different domain at the same time? Or does it mean if you want to protect different domains, you need to train your encoder individually?
Yes, this is a very good question. So the question is that what if there are multiple target domains? How can you do the protection? So we actually have some evaluation on when we have a multiple target data set. However, the drawback is that when you have this multiple data set, you will update this encoder for multiple times. That might hurt the performance for the source domains. So it's doable because we only modify part of these weights of these pre-trained encoders. So, but it may hurt the performance on the source. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining. And with that, we conclude today's session on ML security. Thanks.